Welcome to the Deep Dive. We take your sources, articles, research notes, and really dig into them to pull out the key insights for you.
That's the goal.
And today, we're tackling, well, it feels like a huge question, maybe one of the oldest. Why are we all different? Are we just, born a certain way, abilities fixed? Or can we actually change, grow, become something different?
It really gets to the heart of that whole nature versus nurture thing, doesn't it? People have looked everywhere for answers. Bumps on the skull, genes, your background, experiences. There's always been this pull towards thinking maybe our differences are just permanent, set in stone somehow.
Which brings us right to today's topic, mindsets. Specifically, this idea of a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. We've got some really interesting material here, research studies, some history, and lots of real-world examples. Education, sports, leadership, even just daily life.
Yeah, and our mission really for this deep dive is to unpack what these mindsets actually are, explore how deeply they can impact your life, and look at what these sources say about whether you can actually change your mindset.
Basically distilling those crucial nuggets of wisdom.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's dive in. The core distinction, fixed versus growth. What is it fundamentally?
Well, at its most basic level, the fixed mindset is it's the belief that your fundamental qualities, things like how smart you are, your personality, your basic character, they're just static, carved in stone.
You get what you get.
Pretty much. You have a certain amount of intelligence, a certain personality, and that's just the way it is.
So it's like being dealt a hand of cards, and you just have to play that hand for the rest of your life.
That's a perfect analogy. And if you really believe that your core traits are fixed, it creates this internal pressure, this constant need to prove yourself.
Prove you have enough of the good stuff?
Exactly. Prove you're smart enough, talented enough. Because if you mess up, if you show a weakness, well, if it's fixed, that weakness feels permanent. It's terrifying.
Which would make things like effort or taking a risk seem really threatening.
Precisely. Because failure isn't just a temporary setback in that view. It's like, it's evidence that your fixed amount isn't good enough.
Okay, I get that. So the growth mindset flips this.
Completely.
Yeah.
The growth mindset is built on the belief that your basic abilities, your qualities, there's things you can cultivate, you can develop them.
No?
Through effort, developing better strategies, getting help from others, learning, it's about growth.
So the hand you're dealt is just
Yeah.
the starting point, not the final word.
Exactly. Your potential isn't some fixed number you can measure at the start. That's a key thing in the sources, this idea that true potential is actually unknown. It's unknowable. Yeah, think about it. How could you possibly predict what someone might achieve with, years and years of passion, hard work, dedicated training? The sources mention people like Darwin, Tolstoy, like apparently seen as pretty ordinary kids.
I didn't know that.
Or Ben Hogan, the golfer, apparently quite uncoordinated early on. Cindy Sherman failed her first photography class. Geraldine Page was told she had no acting talent.
Wow. So their starting points really didn't predict their eventual success.
Not at all. Which really contrasts with that idea of just pure innate talent.
And you mentioned this isn't just a new idea. Alfred Binet, the IQ test guy.
Yeah, this is fascinating, isn't it? Because most people think the IQ test is the measure of fixed intelligence. But Binet, he developed it to identify kids who were struggling so they could get help.
To help them grow.
Yes. He fundamentally believed intelligence wasn't fixed. He thought it could be increased with the right education, the right practice. He actually argued against what he called the brutal pessimism of fixed intelligence views.
That's completely different from that teacher mentioned, Mrs. Wilson, who seeded kids by IQ score.
Worlds apart.
Oh.
That kind of environment, like you said, it just screams fixed mindset. The goal becomes looking smart, not actually learning. It shows how much a leader's mindset shapes things.
Right.
And bringing it up to date, modern science pretty much agrees it's not simple nature or nurture, it's this constant interaction. Genes need input from the environment to even work properly.
So experience, training, effort, they're not just extras, they're crucial for how things unfold.
Absolutely fundamental. Robert Sternberg, who's a big name in intelligence research today, he emphasizes that the main factor in reaching expertise isn't some fixed starting ability, it's what he calls purposeful engagement.
What you do with what you have.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the basic difference laid out. Let's get practical. How does this belief actually, show up in your life day to day?
Oh, it shows up everywhere, big time, in how you set goals, and maybe even more importantly, how you react when things get tough. If you've got that fixed mindset, the main goal is always proving yourself, looking So every situation feels like a test. Will I succeed or fail? Will I look smart or dumb?
That sounds exhausting. Constantly defending your image.
It can be incredibly stressful. All your energy is focused outward on validation. But with a growth mindset, the passion is more internal. It's about learning, about stretching yourself, genuinely getting better.
The goal isn't the gold star, it's the becoming smarter part.
Right. It's the process.
And this affects how you see effort and risk too, right?
Massively.
Oh, completely. Changes everything. In a fixed mindset, effort is suspect. Like if you were really smart, shouldn't it be easy?
Right. So needing to try hard feels like proof you lack the gift.
Exactly. So you might actually avoid effort and risk. Terrifying. Because if you fail, it reflects badly on your fixed self. So those old sayings get twisted. It's not nothing ventured, nothing gained. It's more like nothing ventured, nothing lost.
Or if at first you don't succeed, maybe just stop, basically. Maybe you just don't have the knack. It's like effort and risk are just traps waiting to expose you.
Because your worth is tied up in those fixed traits.
That's the core of it. Anything that challenges those traits feels dangerous. It's even why some people with a fixed mindset hate asking for help.
Because asking for help means admitting you can't do it alone, revealing that fixed flaw.
Precisely.
That makes me think of that Calvin and Hobbes comic strip you mentioned.
Oh, yeah. The one where one kid is just sweating over his homework, rereading, checking notes.
And the other kid, Calvin, I think, looks at him and says, I used to think you were smart.
It's perfect. It captures that subtle societal message that real talent is effortless. If you have to work at it, you must not be truly gifted. That fits right into the fixed mindset.
Yeah, it really shows how damaging that belief in effortless achievement can be. And this whole attitude gets tested most when you face failure, right?
Oh, absolutely. That's where the difference really becomes stark. For someone deep in a fixed mindset, failure isn't just something that happened. It can feel like who you are.
It becomes your identity.
Yeah. The sources use that really tragic example of Bernard Loiseau, the famous French chef.
Right, who killed himself after his restaurant, lost a couple of points in a guide, and there were rumors he might lose a Michelin star.
It's a devastating example. When failure gets interpreted as proof, you're fundamentally flawed, and that defines your whole identity. The consequences can be catastrophic. For him, losing points wasn't just a bad review. It meant he was a failure.
But the growth mindset sees failure differently, as a problem to solve.
Exactly. It's data. It's something to be faced, dealt with, learned from. It doesn't define you. Think about Jim Marshall, the football player.
The guy who ran the wrong way, oh man.
Picked up a fumble, ran it back into his own end zone on national TV. Talk about a mistake.
Mortifying.
He said afterwards he was just completely devastated, filled with shame, but instead of letting that label him forever as the wrong way runner,
He shifted his perspective.
he made a choice. He could let the shame eat him alive, or he could face it, figure out what went wrong, learn from it. He actually went back out, played great in the second half, they won the game, and he later used that whole experience in talks to help others.
So the failure was a lesson, not a label.
That's the key shift from I am a failure to I experienced a failure and I can learn from this. And the sources make this interesting point too with the growth mindset. You don't always need to feel confident before you jump into something hard.
That seems backwards. Don't you need confidence to tackle challenges?
You'd think so, but with the growth mindset, sometimes you might choose to do something specifically because you're not good at it yet. The driving force isn't proving you're already great, it's the desire to learn and improve.
So not being good at it is the reason to do it.
Could be. It's not seen as a barrier, but as the whole point of the exercise to grow.
Okay, so these mindsets really affect us personally. But how do they play out in broader areas like education? What's the impact on students?
Oh, it's huge in education, especially during tough transitions like the move to junior high. The sources talk about a study that followed kids through that period.
Where the work gets harder, grading might be tougher.
Exactly. And what they found was students with a fixed mindset. Their grades tended to drop.
Why?
When things got difficult, they tended to blame their ability. I'm just not smart enough for this. I guess I'm dumb. Or they blame the teachers. Neither approach helps you learn.
Yeah, it sounds like a recipe for giving up.
Pretty much. But the students with a growth mindset, their grades actually tended to increase during that same challenging time.
Really? How?
Because the difficulty didn't signal you're not smart. It signaled, okay, time to work harder, try different strategies, maybe ask for help. They mobilized their resources to learn, not to protect their ego.
that amazing story about George Danzig, the math student.
Oh yeah, the classic. He walks in late to class, sees 2 problems on the board, assumes they're homework.
Just solves them.
Right. Works on them for days, finds them really hard, but eventually figures them out, turns them in, apologizing for being late. Turns out they weren't homework. They were 2 famous unsolved problems in statistics.
Wow. Because he just assumed they were solvable with enough effort.
Exactly. He had that growth mindset approach, saw them as challenges requiring persistence, not as tests of some fixed innate math genius he might or might not have.
Which is the complete opposite of what the sources call the low effort syndrome.
Yes, and this is a big issue, especially in adolescence. If you think school is just a test of how smart you are inherently,
Then trying hard and still failing is the worst possible outcome.
devastating. It feels like definitive proof you're not smart. So to protect their ego, some kids, even really bright ones, deliberately don't try hard.
The old I could have done better if I'd tried defense.
Exactly. They disconnect effort from achievement to shield their sense of fixed ability. But for growth mindset kids, adolescence is seen as this amazing opportunity to develop. Effort isn't the enemy, it's the tool that makes you smarter.
Like that story of Jimmy, the low effort kid.
Yeah, the hardcore, turned off, low effort kid. When someone finally explained the growth mindset to him, the idea that effort actually makes your brain stronger, it was like a switch flipped.
What did he say?
He looked up, apparently with tears in his eyes, and asked, "You mean I don't have to be dumb?" And from then on, he started working like crazy because he believed his effort was actually making him smarter. It's such a powerful illustration of how changing a core belief can change behavior.
And obviously, teachers and parents play a huge role in shaping these beliefs.
Absolutely critical. Their mindset, the language they use, it creates the whole environment. The key seems to be praising the process.
What do you mean process?
Praising the effort, the strategies used, the persistence, the learning from mistakes, what the sources call process-oriented praise. Saying things like, "Wow, you really stuck with that problem you tried a bunch of different ways," or "I like how you went back and figured out your mistake."
Instead of just, "You're so smart."
Right, because that "you're so smart" praise counterintuitively can make kids afraid to take on challenges later. They don't want to risk doing something that might make them look not smart and lose that label.
Huh.
But the sources also warn about something called false growth mindset.
What's that? Just paying lip service.
Kind of. It's focusing only on effort without acknowledging the importance of strategy, learning, and seeking help. Telling a kid to just try harder when they're using a totally ineffective strategy isn't helpful.
Right, it's not just banging your head against the wall harder.
No, it's about effective effort. Trying new approaches, learning from what doesn't work, knowing when to ask for guidance, and parents modeling this is huge too. A parent saying, "Oh, I'm terrible at cooking," versus "I'm taking a cooking class because I want to get better," sends very different messages.
Now, you mentioned earlier about looking closely at the sources. They note that some big meta-analyses show the direct link between growth mindset interventions and academic achievement is sometimes, well, weaker than you might expect.
Yes, that's an important nuance they bring up. It's not always a super strong, direct correlation in every single study. And the sources suggest a few reasons why this might be. Well, maybe the interventions themselves weren't robust enough. A quick 30-minute lesson might not be enough to shift deeply held beliefs. Or it could be how mindset interacts with other beliefs.
Other beliefs, like what?
Like maybe a student has a growth mindset about their intelligence. I can get smarter, but they also have a fixed belief about their self-worth being tied entirely to grades. I'm only okay if I get straight A's. That other fixed belief might kind of override the benefits of the growth mindset about ability.
So it's complicated. Mindset is powerful, but it's interacting with other things, and how you foster it really matters.
Exactly. It's not like a magic switch, but it seems to be this foundational belief that allows other good things, effective effort, smart strategies, resilience to failure to happen.
Okay, let's switch gears. What about artistic ability? That feels like something people often think is just a gift.
Oh, definitely. That's a classic fixed mindset area. You either have it or you don't. The sources really push back on that. The author even shares their own struggles, feeling totally inept at drawing, like that owl anecdote.
Oh yeah, drawing the owl in the guest book, that's painfully relatable for anyone who thinks they can't draw.
Right, but then they highlight things like Betty Edwards' book, Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain. Have you seen those before and after pictures from her courses?
I think I have, yeah. They're pretty amazing.
Totally amazing. People go from drawing, basic stick figures or really distorted faces to producing these incredibly realistic self-portraits after just a few days.
So it shows that drawing isn't some mystical talent. It's actually a set of skills you can learn, like learning how to perceive edges, spaces, light, shadow.
Precisely. It's about training your perception and learning techniques. Sure, maybe some people pick it up a bit quicker at first, but the evidence strongly suggests that artistic skill is something that can be developed significantly with the right instruction and practice. It's not just a fixed gift you're born with or without.
And sports, another area where natural talent gets talked about a lot.
Yeah, but sports is also a fantastic place to see the growth mindset in action. Think about Mia Hamm, one of the all-time greats in soccer.
Right.
She didn't just rest on her talent. Her thing was always playing up, deliberately seeking out tougher competition, older, better players. Her focus wasn't on proving she was the best now, but on constantly pushing herself to get better.
Always stretching. And what about Patricia Miranda, the wrestler? That story is incredible.
It really is. She has this tough loss. Someone tells her she's a joke at wrestling. But she's fueled by something deeper, honoring her mother, wanting to truly explore her own limits. She decides to commit completely.
Not just to prove the critic wrong, but to see what she could become.
Exactly. It wasn't about hitting back from a fixed place. It was about the process of becoming. Could she, through sheer dedication, effort, and learning, transform herself into a top wrestler? And she did. She won an Olympic medal.
Amazing.
And what's maybe even more telling is what she did after that. Went to Yale Law School, excited apparently about being a beginner again, starting at the bottom, facing a new learning curve. That's the growth mindset embodied.
Okay, let's look at leadership in professional settings. How do mindsets play out there?
Well, think about rigid thinking. We've always done it this way. That's often rooted in a fixed mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, if you think your current way is the result of your fixed good judgment, you won't want to change it.
Exactly. It limits innovation, adaptability, and that fear of failure we talked about. It can paralyze leaders. A fixed mindset leader might avoid necessary risks because a failure would reflect badly on their innate ability or intelligence.
Which stifles the whole team's creativity. People get scared to make mistakes.
Right. So developing a real leadership mindset means actively fighting those fixed tendencies. It means seeing challenges not as threats, but as opportunities for the team to learn and grow. Being open to new ideas, genuinely listening to feedback.
And the sources mentioned emotional intelligence being key here too.
Hugely important. Being able to read your own emotions, manage them, understand where others are coming from. These skills are crucial for adapting, inspiring people, creating a climate where it's safe to try things and learn. Apparently, 2/3 of essential leadership skills are emotional competencies.
That's what the sources suggest.
Which really highlights how important these developable softer skills are. Things like managing stress, preventing burnout, building morale, even just remembering to celebrate successes, not just the huge wins, but the small steps forward. A fixed mindset leader might overlook the value of acknowledging progress and effort.
And resilience. That feels tightly connected to all of this.
Yeah.
How does mindset influence our ability to bounce back?
It's absolutely fundamental. Resilience isn't just, pretending everything's fine. It's the mental and emotional toolkit you use to cope when things get tough.
Facing fears, understanding limitations, but not being stopped by them.
Exactly. It's about finding a path forward despite the obstacles, like that incredible story in the sources about the blind student.
Who paid for university by selling Braille notes.
Yeah. He transcribed notes for his classmates. He didn't deny the challenge of his blindness, but his mindset allowed him to see it not just as a limitation, but also as something that gave him a unique skill he could use to solve his financial problem creatively.
That's amazing resilience. And there's brain science behind this too.
Apparently so. Studies suggest resilient people might have brains that are, wired a bit differently, maybe more robust connections, better regulation of stress hormones, faster recovery from negative stuff. But the exciting part is, the research indicates we can actually change our brains through practice to become more resilient.
So it goes back to mindset and determination.
It seems like your core beliefs, your determination to find a way, are incredibly powerful levers for building that resilience.
Listening to all this really makes you think about the messages you absorb from outside and the ones you tell yourself.
Absolutely. Those external messages can be so powerful, like stereotypes. The sources talk about how negative stereotypes about race, gender, whatever, can really drag down performance, especially for people with a fixed mindset.
Even just checking a box for race or gender before a test can trigger it. That stereotype threat.
That's the idea. It's this background worry. What if I confirm the negative stereotype about my group? And that worry uses up mental energy you need for the actual task.
Right.
If you have a fixed mindset, you're more vulnerable because the stereotype seems to confirm this idea of fixed group-based limits. And interestingly, even positive labels can be a burden in a fixed mindset
How so?
because you live in constant fear of losing that gifted label, doing anything that might reveal you're not effortlessly perfect.
Whereas a growth mindset helps you see stereotypes as just someone else's limited opinion, something to challenge.
Exactly. It's not seen as a reflection of your fixed reality. The example of the women in the calculus class illustrates this well.
The ones facing stereotypes about women in math.
Yeah. The fixed mindset women felt their sense of belonging just crumble under that pressure. But the growth mindset women, while they knew the stereotype existed, didn't internalize it the same way. They felt they could still belong, learn, and fight back because they didn't believe in fixed inferiority.
And what about relying too much on what other people think? Especially if you were always praised for being perfect.
That seems to be a pattern, particularly for high-achieving girls or women. If you grow up getting constant praise for just being smart or good, without much emphasis on effort or process, you can become really dependent on that external validation. The author's story about being so upset by strangers calling her bad-mannered in Hawaii.
Yeah, that was striking.
It shows how much external judgment can sting when your self-worth is tied to it. And Dr. Frances Conley, the neurosurgeon, doubting herself after being called honey.
Even with all her accomplishments.
It just shows how potent those external messages can be when filtered through a certain mindset. The sources suggest, maybe controversially, that males might sometimes be a bit less vulnerable because they often receive more direct criticism growing up, which might toughen them up a bit to negative feedback. But look at Julie Lynch, losing her passion for programming after one negative comment from a teacher.
Interpreting it as, I'm just not cut out for this.
Exactly. A fixed mindset interpretation that shut down her interest.
So external messages matter, but ultimately it comes down to that internal conversation, right? Your self-talk.
That's really where your mindset lives day to day. It's shaped by your core beliefs about yourself, about others, about how the world works. You can often spot your mindset by listening for those underlying assumptions. I am basically people, or generally what the world is, and therefore I need to act like
Those statements are like the code running your internal program.
Kind of, yeah. And our brains process words incredibly fast. The tricky part is the negativity bias. Negative thoughts often grab our attention more quickly. So the words you use inside your head, they have a massive impact on how you feel and what you do.
Like the author's story about the photo of herself.
Yeah, she'd been telling herself she was just bloated. Kind of a softer, less harsh word.
An excuse, almost.
Right. But seeing the picture triggered a moment of really blunt self-talk. No, you're fat.
That sounds harsh, but it helped her.
In her case, yes, because it cut through the denial. That direct, uncomfortable self-assessment became the catalyst for her to take responsibility and make real changes to her lifestyle. It's a stark example, maybe, but it shows how confronting reality honestly in your self-talk without the fixed mindset excuses can be the first step towards growth.
Okay, this leads to the big question then. If mindsets are so ingrained, can you actually change them? Sounds hard.
The sources are pretty optimistic, actually. They say yes, absolutely. Mindsets are a big part of personality, sure, but they can be changed. And just learning about them, like we're doing now, is a huge first step.
Awareness is key.
It's the foundation. The real work is developing that self-awareness in the moment, catching yourself when you slip into the fixed mindset.
How do you do that? What do you look for?
You start by identifying your triggers. What situations reliably kick off that fixed mindset thinking for you? Is it facing a really tough challenge? Getting critical feedback? Making a mistake? Seeing someone else succeed easily at something you find hard?
Okay, so you notice the trigger situation. Then what?
Then you listen for the voice, that internal dialogue, the fixed mindset voice.
What does it sound like?
It might sound like doubt. Are you sure you can handle this? Better not risk it. Or like judgment. See? Told you aren't smart enough. Or like making excuses. It's not my fault the task was unfair. I just don't have the talent.
Got it. Hear the voice.
And then comes the crucial part. Recognize you have a choice. Right there, in that moment. You don't have to just accept that fixed mindset script.
You can choose a different response.
Exactly. You choose to respond with a growth mindset. You actively reframe the situation, that challenge. It's an opportunity to learn. The setback. It's valuable feedback. The criticism. It's information for improvement. Someone else's success. It's inspiration maybe you can learn from their strategy.
So the fixed mindset thought becomes a cue.
A cue to engage your growth mindset,
Huh.
to up the effort, maybe change your strategy, ask for help, keep going.
And then you need to actually do things differently, align your actions.
Yes, that's vital. Thinking differently is great, but acting differently cements the change. You can literally ask yourself, okay, what would someone with a growth mindset do right now? List those actions. Maybe it's breaking the problem down. Maybe it's researching a new approach. Maybe it's asking for advice. Then you consciously choose to own that mindset and take one of those actions, even if it feels a bit forced at first.
Acting your way into the new belief. What if the new belief feels totally unbelievable? Like, I am confident when you feel zero confidence.
That's where bridge beliefs come in, according to the sources. Don't try to jump straight to I am confident. Start with something more believable that moves you in the right direction, like I am learning to trust my abilities more, or I am willing to try even when I feel uncertain.
Smaller, more manageable steps.
Exactly. They bridge the gap between where you are and where you want to be. And this whole process, catching the fixed voice, challenging it, choosing growth actions, directly builds resilience.
How so?
Because it's about moving away from helplessness. The sources talk about trading the victim card, blaming circumstances, feeling powerless for the victor card.
Which means?
Taking responsibility for what you can control, focusing on finding solutions, refusing to make excuses. It's that shift from this is happening to me to how can I respond effectively to this? That author's story about her weight, that was her ditching the victim card, I'm just bloated, and grabbing the victor card, I need to take action. It all starts with changing that internal dialogue and then following through.
Wow. Okay, this has been quite the journey. We started with that fundamental question, why are we different? Nature, nurture, and we've really unpacked how these core beliefs about ability, fixed, or growth just ripple outwards.
Yeah, affecting everything from how you handle a tough class or a big presentation to how you lead, how you react to stereotypes, how you bounce back from failure.
And the big message seems to be that these mindsets, while powerful, aren't destiny. They're malleable ways of thinking.
Absolutely. The view you adopt for yourself profoundly shapes your life, your potential. External factors exist, of course, but that internal landscape, how you interpret challenges, effort, feedback, that's where you have tremendous power.
It really feels empowering. You have agency in your own development.
Definitely.
Which leaves us with, I guess, a final thought to chew on. If our true potential really is unknown, unknowable, something built over time through passion, hard work, learning from mistakes, what potential might still be dormant inside you? What capabilities could you unlock simply by choosing to believe, truly believe they can be cultivated? What challenge, maybe one you've been avoiding, could you step into today that might just reveal something completely new about what you're capable of?
That's a powerful question to end on.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.